All right, by raise of hands, how many of you have ever traveled outside the country? Outside the country, raise your hands. All right, so let me ask you a question. Put your hands back down. What did you have to, I want y'all got to speak it a little loud because I'm getting older. I turned 45. So I'm like, right? I know, whatever. I'm neither young nor old, right? All young people are like, you're so old. All old people are like, you're so, I don't know what I am, but here we go. If you've traveled outside of the country, what is it that you have to get out of the country and get into another country, or what? All right, passport or visa, right? You have to, because you're going to somewhere that's not your country, right? Now, I hope everyone raises their hand, right? How many of you have ever traveled to another state? Raise your hand. How many of you have never left the borders of Arkansas? It's good, because we can take a trip this afternoon. We're just going to drive right over the border. All right, let me ask you a question. What did you have to cross over the border to another state? You had to have what? Nothing. Some gas, right? Gas, a little bit of money, so you get back. Christianity in a way is like this. We have some national borders that we call core doctrines. And if you cross over those borders, you are in another religion, right? So Christianity believes that there's a Trinity, that God is Trinity, 3 in 1, 1 in 3. If you get that wrong, you have crossed over into another religion. Christianity believes that Jesus Christ is the Son of the living God, and through that we find salvation. If you mess up who Jesus is, you have crossed over a national border and moved into another. You follow me so far? Okay. Christianity also has state borders, and we call those opinions. Everyone say opinions. There we go. The Lutherans do it one way. The Presbyterians do it another way. The Baptists do it without any alcohol, right? And Kojic, woo, does it their way. We all do a little bit differently. Bishop's going to fire me every week. Every week I'm up here. Now, here's the deal. The problem becomes when we take our opinions, state borders, and make them doctrines, national borders, and start pushing people out of Christianity, right? And it's very natural to think this. Where to go? It's very natural to think, here we go, I'm getting there, going to back up, and going to back up. We all think the way that we do church is the way what? To do church. And the reason I bring this up is I don't know if you noticed, but we sort of started a new church last week, right? Yep. And I also don't know if you've noticed, but Legacy Grace Temple and Legacy Grace Church did church a little bit differently. And by a little bit differently, what I mean is a lot of bit differently. Right? From the very, right, let's just take the stage right here. We'll start here. Worship, Legacy Grace Temple, keys, which is the center of every African American church, drums, right? Center of every Caucasian church, acoustic guitar. We learned that in the 70s. That's right, chung, 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 right? Y'all had like 500 singers up here. We had one, right? Y'all have no words on the screen. We have all the words on the screen. They're never on the screen when you need them, but they are generally. You did a great job, Travis, right? Preaching's different. Neil tells me all the time, the main goal of preaching in an African American church is what? Inspiration. And the main goal of preaching in a white church is information. Two different things, right? Y'all called y'all's pastors the bishop. And you called his wife the first lady. Grace Church called me They called us Josh and Julie. Not Joshua, not Reverend Joshua, not Pastor Joshua. And they didn't even put the whole and in there. It's a Josh, Julie. We do Grace Kids differently. We do Grace Students differently. We do the welcome team differently. We dress differently. I realized, Legacy Grace Church people, that your Legacy Grace Temple friends generally dress up on the first Sunday of the month. So I wore a coat over a t-shirt, right? Bishop sleeps in the three-piece suit. Prayer, right? Prayer. When we used to pray at Grace Church, it's like everyone pray very silently in your seats. Don't make it sound. Don't jingle your keys or it'll get, right? Y'all have prayer blankets that y'all throw on people that fall on the ground. I don't even know what that's called. I just call it the fall on the ground prayer blanket. That's what that, right? Because here's what we all naturally think. We all naturally think the way that we do church is the way, what? To do church. So here's the question. If I can get my clicker to work, how do you do church together with those who do church differently? That's why we're beginning, and we're going to go through the book of Romans this fall, because the main point of the book of Romans is simply this: accept one another just as Christ accepted you, right? This is what Romans is all about. The book of Romans is about chapter 15, verse 7. And we need this because here's what we need to do. We need to accept one another, which starts in chapter 16, 12 through 16. How are we supposed to accept one another? Just as Christ accepted us, which chapters 1 through 11 tells us how to do that. So we're preaching it in reverse so that you get the point, and then we can back it up. So that being said, just like in any church, just like in our church, there was a problem in the church of Rome. Some of the people in the church were vegetarians, and other people in the church were normal. They were not vegetarians. That's what I meant to say, was they were not vegetarians. It says in this verse, goodness, my clicker is not working. You might have to help me back there because it's kind of getting it. It says in Romans chapter 14, verse 2, that one person's faith allows them to eat anything, but another whose faith is weak eats only what? Now, the problem was not vegetarian versus not vegetarian. The problem was why the vegetarians were vegetarians. You see, what had happened was, in the church, there was two different groups. There were people who were converted from paganism or Gentiles, and there were people who were converted from Judaism or Jews, and the Jewish Christians had a certain background. You see, in the book of Leviticus and Deuteronomy, the Lord told the Jewish nation, there are certain things that you can eat, and there are certain things that you cannot eat. So you cannot have a barbecue. You cannot eat, I know. You cannot eat shrimp, right? All of these things. And so the Jewish Christians came with their Judaism into the church, and they had these traditions, they had this background, they had the way that they did church. And they considered eating this meat unclean. But here's the problem. Verse 14, Paul says, I, Paul, am convinced, being persuaded by who? So Jesus and Paul are on this side, that what? Nothing is unclean. So Jesus and Paul are like, listen, those dietary laws that you found in the Old Testament, Jesus says, I fulfilled them. I fulfilled the law when I came. They no longer apply to you. Go have barbecue. Go have shrimp. Go have all. It's fine. But to the Jewish Christians who grew up a certain way, who their church always did it a certain way, were really struggling. They were weak in this area. Everybody say weak. Because it says in Romans chapter 14, verse 2, one person's faith allows them to eat anything, but another whose faith is weak eats only vegetables. So I need you to get this. The Jewish Christians were weak in this area, and the Gentile Christians in the same church were what? Strong, right? But here's what's interesting. If you turn over to 1 Corinthians In the Corinth church down the street, there's a fight over food in that church. But in that church, what had happened was the Gentile Christians grew up worshiping all these Roman and Greek gods, right? Zeus and Apollos and Athena, all that kind of stuff. And the meat in their city, they would go, the priest would bless the meat, and they would dedicate this bull to the worship of Zeus. They'd kill the bull, and then they'd pass it around the city. And so the Gentile Christians were like, I don't know if I can eat that meat. I don't know, because it was dedicated to some pagan idol. And so they're like, we're not going to eat the meat. Whereas the Jewish Christians in Corinth were like, idols aren't real. Let's just eat, right? They were like, let's have a burger, right? And so what's interesting is in Corinth, the Gentile Christians were weak, and the Jewish Christians were what? Strong. What this means, pay attention. In one area of following Jesus, the Gentile Christians were stronger and the Jewish Christians were weaker. But in another area of following Jesus, the Jewish Christians were stronger and the Gentile Christians were weaker. You follow me so far? There's two things we can learn here right off the bat. Number one, Grace United, we need to say this. We need to admit this. Our cultural differences are a huge problem. They just are. Legacy Grace Temple came in here with a culture, a way of doing things, a way we've always done things, a tradition. They understand why they do the things. They like the way they do their things. Legacy Grace Church comes in here with a culture, a tradition, a way of doing things. They like the way they do certain things, and they can't be ignored. They have to be dealt with. So our cultural differences are a huge problem, but catch this. Our cultural differences are also the solution. Because in some ways, Legacy Grace Temple is strong and Legacy Grace Church is weak. And in some ways, Legacy Grace Church is strong and Legacy Grace Temple is weak. And only together can we see the gospel more clearly. Can we see Jesus more clearly? Can we see God more clearly? And here's the deal. You know this to be true. Because in heaven, we talk about every tribe and every what? Tongue and every language and every culture. And we know that in heaven, that only seeing them side by side by side and all expressing what God has put into them and their strength can we truly see the work of God. And so only together can we solve this problem. Right. The question is, of course, how? How are we going to get this done? I'm going to give you a solution that does not work that most of you think works. We're going to start here. I'm going to offend you, and then I'm going to lift you up. So just bear with me while I offend you. It's okay. It's me too. Because here's the deal. Most of us believe in the world's solution, but the world's solution does not work. Let me show you what I mean. When it comes to disagreement, when it comes to opinions, we all understand as Americans that being narrow-minded is not the solution. We got that part, right? Just the people that are like, it's my way or the highway, we all unanimously, don't look that up, it's a real word. Don't Google me right now. But all together now. But most everyone in this room believes the solution to being narrow-minded is to be what? Broad-minded. In America, we are all told to believe two things, and most of us do. Here they are. I'm about to offend you, but I'm going to show you something. We're told to hold on to two things. Number one, we're told to hold on to no one has the truth. I don't have the truth. You don't have the truth. Your truth can be your truth. Your truth can be your truth. Your truth can be your morality is just fine. Your morality is just fine. No one has the truth. There is no right and wrong, only right and wrong for you, but your right and wrong doesn't apply to anybody else. That's number one. Number two is this. Your truth won't change my life. Right? Although I'll let you believe whatever you want to believe, and whatever you want to believe, I will affirm all day long. I'm not going to let you and your beliefs affect me in one iota. I'm not going to let you step over that line. You're not going to change me. So we're told most of us believe the solution to being narrow-minded, which we all know is wrong, is to be broad-minded for broad-minded's sake. Everyone is right, only here's the deal. I'm about to show you something, and you see it every day. You just haven't connected that it's true. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Let's go back to the Bible, and then I'll show it to you in our culture. It says this in Romans 14, verse 3. It says, the one who eats everything must not treat with what? Contempt the one who does not. And the one who does eat everything must not what? Judge the one who does, for God's accepted them both. Why would Paul tell the strong not to treat the weak with contempt? Because they were. They were. And why would Paul tell the weak not to judge the strong? Because they what? This is what was happening in Rome. What was happening in Rome is gonna be that. The weak look down on the strong, and the strong look down on the weak. Or to put it in our culture in America, it's this. Travis, help me out. The narrow-minded look down on the broad-minded, and the broad-minded look down on the narrow-minded. You know this to be true. It doesn't matter which news station you subscribe to. You can subscribe to the conservative news station or the liberal news station, but they are both looking down on the other with contempt. They're both judging the other. It doesn't matter which political party you follow, the more conservative political party or the more progressive liberal party. What they're doing down every day is judging, looking down on, excluding the other. It doesn't matter if you're on Wall Street or you're a hippie, you have a lot of money or you don't. What you're doing is you are looking down on the other. Here's the deal. Here's the problem. Being broad-minded can make you just as angry, just as disdainful, just as judgmental, just as exclusive as those that you consider narrow-minded. And just to be clear, if you are intolerant of intolerant people, you are intolerant. If you are judgmental of judgmental people, you are judgmental. If you exclude people that you feel exclude others, you are exclusive. This is a problem in the Roman church. This is a problem in America. And if we adopt the world's system, this will be a problem at Grace United. The good news is Paul gives us another option. And the other option, remember, the church is struggling with food. We're not struggling with the same issue. They're struggling with food. The Jewish Christians are eating kosher. They're eating vegetarian. The Gentile Christians are like, we can eat wherever we want, right? And Paul says, look at verse 1, verse 4. There you go. You're there. He says, except the one whose faith is what? Weak. He calls them, He calls them weak. This is the exact opposite of what our culture tells us to do. In the world, it says, tell no one that they are wrong. But Paul says, no, there's a right and there's a wrong. Me, Jesus, we're on the right side, we're the strong, and y'all are the weak. And then in chapter 15, he says, but we who are strong ought to what? Bear with the failings of the weak and not please ourselves. He says that we are supposed to adjust our lives in all kinds of ways. Our culture says, I don't care what you believe, I'm not going to change my life for you at all. Paul says the exact opposite. He says, bear with. We're supposed to see their side of things. We're supposed to understand why they believe what they're going to believe. We're supposed to be patient with them. We're supposed to be kind to them. And in Corinth, he says, if me never eating meat again advances the gospel, I'll become a vegetarian. Amen. Isn't that insane in our culture to become a vegetarian for them? See, here's the difference between the weak and the strong. Where'd my clicker go? Where'd he go? He came and left. Okay, next. Our world says this. No one has the truth, and your truth won't change my life. But our God says this. There is truth, and I'll change my life so that you can meet the truth. Amen. You see the exact opposite of our thought process with a godly thought process? Let me ask you a question. Why do people generally go to church with people just like them? It's not a trick question. It's not a theological question. Why do people go to church with people just like them? Because it's easy. It's comfortable. It's easy to go to people who share the same political party you do. It's easy to go to a church with people that have the same type of worship taste and style that you do. It's easy to go to a church where people, their kids go to the same type of church that you do, like the homeschool churches and the private school churches and the public school church. It's easy to go to a church with the same prejudices that you have. It's easy to go to church where you don't have to explain to them every time what you mean by said thing that you said. It's easy to go to church where you don't have to bite your tongue because someone from another culture didn't understand where you came from. It's easy to go to church where you don't have to talk about your background because everyone has your same background. Neil, Bishop, and I, almost every day, and they will say this is true, we almost every day, I'm telling you, we're sitting in one of each other's office and we ask these questions. What did you mean by that? Not that angry. Let me back that up. What did you mean by that? I don't know. When you said that hurt my feelings. Please explain that to me. The question is this is a great call, and where do we get this power? And the answer to that is simply this. Accept one another just as Christ accepted you. This is the main point. Everybody say main point. This is the main point of the book of Romans. And let me ask you a question. If I asked you and I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to play basketball just as Michael Jordan played the GOAT, right? We all agree. If you don't agree, there are other churches to go to. Right. LeBron James is the best. Who you talking to? If I asked you to play basketball just as Michael Jordan played basketball, what would you have to do? You had to do film study. You had to get in shape. You had to get a little exercise, a little film study, learn how to dribble. If I asked you to sing, I said, I want you to sing Respect, R-E-S-P-E-C-T, just like Aretha Franklin. Yeah. Right, yeah. What would you have to do? You'd have to go study and figure out, how did she do it? How did she make her changes? Right? You follow me? So if we are to accept one another just as Christ accepted us, what do we need to do? We need to go back and figure out how Christ accepted us. That's what the book of Romans is. Let me give you a little sneak peek. So if you go back to Romans chapter 3, verse 11, it says, there is what? No one righteous, not even one. There is no one who understands, and there is no one who seeks God. Jesus didn't accept you because you were righteous. Jesus didn't accept you because you understood the things of God. Jesus didn't accept you because you were seeking him out. And we are to accept one another just as Christ accepted you. So my acceptance of you can't be based off of your understanding of me. And it can't be because you're seeking me out. It's because I'm seeking you out. Romans chapter 3, verse 23 says this. There's no difference between Jew and Gentile. For what? All have sinned and what? Fall short of the glory of God. Jesus didn't accept you because you were sinless and you met his standards. We are to accept one another just as, say just as, Christ accepted you. My acceptance of you can't be based off of you having it all together and you meeting my standards, right? Go to 5:8. Romans 5:8 says, God demonstrated his own love for us in this. While we were what? Still sinners, Christ did what? Jesus didn't wait for you to get cleaned up. And Jesus didn't say this, I'm not going to alter my life because they believe a different standard. Their truth is different. What did he do? He altered his life to death for you. And we're to accept one another what? Just as Christ accepted you. So my acceptance of you, I have to alter my life so much so that you can come to the truth. And one more. It says this, for I'm convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all of creation will what? Be able to separate us from the love of God that's in Christ Jesus our Lord. Amen. Jesus will not let anything get in between you and him. And we are to accept one another just as, say just as, Christ accepted you. Listen, this is the golden rule on steroids, right? Because the golden rule is what? Do unto others what? As you would have them do unto you. You are the standard of how you treat others. And it's a good one because Jesus said it. But I think this is the platinum rule. Accept one another just as what? Christ accepted you. Now you're not the standard. Jesus is the standard. And I have to treat you like Jesus treated me. Grace United, the question is, and I tell you, the city is watching. How is this going to work? Is this going to implode on itself? How are we going to make this work? And the answer is actually very simple. We need to accept one another, what? Just as Christ accepted us.